Welcome. This is our Guru Nation Q&A jam session. I try and do it at least once a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. I think this is the second one in a few days. I try and load them as they become available. I did have some people, I don't know. I don't want to say bitching, that's too strong a word. Maybe whining that this gets moved 8 times and free stuff, that always comes behind paid stuff. So I had a guy who booked a 24 shared screen final for $1,000, and if he wanted to do that right now, poof, this would be moved, right?
Yeah.
So free stuff does. I try not to change it too often, but you do get updates on that. The way it works is just put any question you have into the chat. We go around the horn. The other free thing on the booking page, there's not many. Everything on YouTube is free. As much as YouTube bothers me to try and sell channel memberships or coffee mugs and t-shirts, they're always sending me things. Oh, you could make more off your channel. I'm blessed enough that it doesn't speak to me to, sell coffee cups and cell phone holders and whatever. Anyways, that being said, everything on the booking page is paid activity. There are a couple free things. The Q&A jam session's free. I see I have Vince here and I have Jen here. I have free office hours for paid students. I do that every other week. Jen's going Thursday. There won't be another one of those, Jen, until after you've already an investment advisor rep. So it won't do you any good. That's free. We have a book club we do about once every 4, 6 weeks where we do a memoir business profile of somebody, and that's free. But everything else is paid activities. All right, let's see what we got going on in the chat today. Which of the following is out of the money when ABC is trading at 42? An ABC 40 put. So, Vince, we have a memory aid device for options called call up, put down. Now, you guys can do me a favor and hold me accountable so that I don't get lazy and, don't put up a whiteboard and do what I should be doing, right? So, I'm going to let me move the chat away from my whiteboard here. And what I like to do is ingestible, but they're telling me that the current market price is 42. Okay. And our mnemonic for that is call up, put down. If the market price is up from the strike price, call contracts would have intrinsic value. They would be in the money. They would have intrinsic value. By the way, those are synonymous terms. Now, intrinsic value is important because on the test fence, sometimes they say you close out at intrinsic value. And if you don't know what that is, you're just going to be staring at the question going, I don't know. Right. So it's kind of like learning a foreign language. They say when you dream the foreign language, that's when you know it. And so that's what we mean by this memory aid device called call up. If the market price is up from the strike price, it has intrinsic value. It's in the money. Another way to say it is it likely to be exercised? Is it likely to be exercised? Call up. The market price is up from the strike price. So we don't know where the strike price here is, but if we were looking at a strike price of 40, for example, we would know that it is in the money, right? If whether you want to do the long perspective or the short perspective, we would say, okay, well, if I can buy this at 40 and the stock's at 42, that's worth 2 points, right? Call up. If the market price is up from the strike price, has intrinsic value. You said a 40 put. If it's a put, it doesn't have any intrinsic value. It's out of the money if it's a put, because for a put to be in the money, it has to be below the strike price.
Even though it's a short put and so it's an obligation to buy,
Doesn't
that's where
matter.
I'm getting hung up.
The good point. I'm glad that you were able to articulate where you're hung up. No. Call up and the concept of intrinsic value in the money does not relate to whether you're long or short. The
Okay.
relationship is to the strike price, the market price. Whether that's good news or bad news is a different question. Right? That's what based on whether you're long or short. Now we do use the long perspective to kind of decide is the contract likely to be exercised. Long or short doesn't matter, Vince. It's not likely the 40 put is going to be exercised at 42. Whether I'm long or short, Vince, if I'm short of 40 put and you stick it to me when the stock's at 42, I'm going to say you must be new. I'm here for you. Open all day long, right? You'd be foolish to do that, right? So that has no intrinsic value. If you're long, you say, hey, Vince, right now it makes no sense. For this 40 put to make sense economically, the stock has to be below 40. Right now, as I said, the most important thing about this concept is there's only three things that can happen to an option contract. Again, Vince, I'm not asking what can happen to a player. That's a different question.
Okay.
I'm asking what can happen to an option contract. The option contract can be traded. The option contract can be exercised. The option contract can expire. Warning, Vince, I'm being a jerk. Is that good news or bad news if the contract gets exercised? You can't tell me that.
It would be bad news, right?
You can't tell me that. And you can't tell me that unless I tell you you're long, you're short, what the start price is.
Hmm.
Again, can you tell me more? Chance to redeem yourself. I tell you the contract expired worthless. It had no intrinsic value at expiration. It expired worthless. I'm being a jerk. Is that good news or bad news?
And again, I guess you don't know, right?
Hey, it depends. All right.
Yeah,
If you
it
want to sound
depends.
smart, when somebody asks you a question, don't answer the question. Just say it depends. You'll sound smart. Say, can you tell me more? The longer you can go without answering the question. Now you can tell me. I say you were long an option contract expired worthless, you lost your premium.
Hmm.
You were short an option contract that expired worthless, you keep the premium.
Right.
So there's not many common threads that relate to options. But what does relate to options is this concept, common thread that if you buy an option position, your risk is the premium. If you sell an option position, your gain is the premium, right? It's opposites. It's a zero sum game, Vince. In this game, there's no such as a win-win. If there's a winner, there's a loser. It's kind of like more like betting, right? All right, let's see what else we got going on there. Catherine. Do I think it's on the 66? No. 65 and 66 NASA exams in general are very light on options because they assume, Catherine, you took a seven already, right?
Correct.
So Vince is going the opposite direction. You guys are crossing, right? Vince is going
Agency
towards the
crossed each
seven, and
other.
you're going away from the seven, right? So if you get an asset question about options, it's usually about hedging. And it's one or two. The way I say it, I always been struggling, Catherine, about how many options videos to put in the playlist for 65 and 66 because I got hundreds of them. I'm like, ugh, I think time is better spent elsewhere. And then what I say is, if you tell me on a NASA exam that you missed it because of options, I say, nah, you had bigger problems elsewhere. That's not going to kill you on either 65 or 66. Vince can probably give it, every draw is different, so don't, depend it too on somebody's draw. I'm wishing for all of you a dream draw. But Vince had a face of death draw in his 66. And one of the reasons, Catherine, he's one of my favorite people of late is because, I have an ego and I like it when people follow my recommendations. I don't know why they wouldn't. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. And I told Vince, hey, how about a 63, 65, which is a 66, and then venture back in business. And he went and got his 63 and his 65. Do you recall, Vince, how many option performance opportunities you had on your 65, 66 as relates to options? A lot, a few, none?
I would say there was a handful on the 65.
Yeah, well,
And
65 makes sense. There'd be more.
yeah.
There you go. I
And I think it's just the sheer amount of questions on the 65,
Yeah.
is it so
I think
um
Catherine, your time would be better spent in like disclosures and
there were no advanced option strategies or anything like that. It was more basic
yeah.
stuff. If you've got
I,
the four quadrants, you're
yeah,
probably
there you go.
fine.
Yeah, I think Catherine, one of the reasons I think you should test right away. We just had a social media guy today who just passed his seven and was wondering where should he look for another job opportunity or go take his 66. I was, well, that's a stupid question. Go take the 66 because those aren't exclusive and you're going to be more valuable if you are going there. And, I kind of an old guy. He said his base is 55,000. And, I didn't want to sound like a grump, but I want to say, you shouldn't be worried about money. If you're 24 years old and you're passing your exams, you're making 55. I would be more concerned with your learning experience and the people you're hanging out with than I would worry about 55 or 85 because in our business, eventually you'll get the 85. You might have to leave. I have a guy who I started with. His name is Jeff Ray, and he saw me on YouTube and reached out to me, and I was kind of reminiscing. I said, Jeff, if you would have just paid us what we were worth, none of us would have left you.
Hmm.
And he said, well, that's my business model is to, pay substandard wages, but teach people the business. And I go, kind of sad. I thought, hey, it worked for him. I mean, he's, living large in retirement, made a lot of money, but it
His
wouldn't be my
retention, thank you.
attitude. Yeah, my attitude would keep the band together if we can, right? I mean, oh well. But anyways, I didn't know I had haters until, I was on social media. I probably did. But Catherine, I told somebody on a 63 not to worry about options. And he got an option question. He still passed. And then, oh my God, it was like a firestorm on 60. Oh, the guru says there's no options on 63, and there is one. Like, oh my God, that's not what I said. I said, don't worry about it. And you pass. So what's the big deal? All right, we got Catherine's got a couple QIDs. Let's bring up the Kaplan Q Bank. Catherine, you say you're taking 66, so let's go grab the Kaplan Q Bank.
Correct. So I understand the answer. So it's more on the 66, it's not like why is this the answer? It's clear when the explanation is there and it's clear what the answer is. It's more just the concept. Would love to just chat
That's
about
what
it a
we're
little bit.
doing. Sure, sure. That's what we're here for. I try to avoid reading the Kaplan rationales before I look at the question, just because sometimes I say the same things they say, sometimes I don't. The Kaplan has subject matter experts, and the subject matter expert who's in charge of these questions at Kaplan is a very eccentric guy in a good way. His name is Chuck Lowenstein. He does bother me sometimes, and every once in a while, as much as we love each other, we get into it because I'll say, "Come on, Chuck, really?" I mean, when he's got like a 4 paragraph explanation, I still think he's the best in the business at NASA exams, but every once in a while he has a rationale where I go, come on. Or he'll say something like that. Well, this isn't on your test. And then I'm saying, well, then why do you write a question about it?
That's what Mark Esposito says as well. I
Yeah,
think you
Mark
know him too. Yeah.
I suppose I have two brothers from another mother, Esposito and Brian Lee. I think because we're simpatico about things. And Espo is so funny because sometimes when I'm not a Kaplan employee and Mark is, and when he gets stuck or something and needs somebody to fill in, he'll call me and say, "Hey, can you cover my class?" And he's so funny. He's good. Hey, don't go over options though, Dean, because I do it differently than you. I go, Mark, I'm not going to step on your toes. You can do it however you want to do it. That's my brother. Hold on, I'm just trying to bring up the screen here.
Dean, can I ask you a question about
Sure,
scheduling
sure.
a
Sure. Hold on just a minute. Let me just two things.
cup?
Let me get my screen up here and then let me. Yeah, Chris, what's up?
I'll go by Chris
Oh,
today.
okay, I'll try and schedule. Are we gonna go down there and meet him or what? Okay. Oh man, I have a guy who's doing a shared screen practice test. I'll call you when I'm done with. I'm doing a session right now, so I'll call you when I'm done. We'll figure it out. All right. My brother, very early on in Bomba's life history, life stage, they were giving away every sock you buy. They give a sock away. I don't know if you're familiar with their business model. But my brother got in on that very early. So once a year, he gets like 50,000, his nonprofit, of these Bomba socks to distribute to homeless shelters. And, the distribution of all these socks is very challenging because, neither one of us are in the business of distributing socks. So he usually partners with a local nonprofit. And we've been this last couple of years, we've been doing them with the Moose Lodge in Kingman, Arizona. And again, they freak out when my brother, last year was the first year we partnered with them, and they get a little concerned when they don't realize when my brother says there's like 50,000 pairs of socks, and they don't realize there's an 18-wheeler showing up, and they get freaked when here's your socks. So this year we're a little wary, and then Mama's only gives you 1 day notice, like, okay, your socks are on the way, and they do underwear and t-shirts, but it's great for the homeless shelters because socks are one of the number one things for that. So, my brother's his philanthropy is very popular, and whether it's the Moose Lodge or the homeless shelters, where he shows with all these socks.
I
The number
love
one,
Bombas. Those are my favorite socks.
they're good stuff, and then the number one rule Bomba has, and we have to make sure we police it and tell people is they don't want to see it at the Goodwill or for sale, right? So you got to make sure that when you're giving the people the socks, listen, these are for you and your charity. These aren't, for to go on eBay or, whatever the case may be. I apologize. So John, you had a question, and then we'll bring up this QID for Catherine.
I didn't want to jump. I didn't want to jump in front of a question. My main thing is just transparency. I failed the 7 twice now.
Oh, wow. Well, that means you're going to do great in the business because you have a sense of resiliency. You can handle negative feedback. And so I'm not worried about you.
I'm
What were your scores the
I'm not
first
worried
time?
about myself either. I've been in the business 20 years on the life insurance side, so
There you go. There you go. If you're there you go, right?
I'm the schmuck who remembered the 6, the 63, and all these other tests. So now I got these guys telling me the 7 and the 66. I'm an old fart. I can't retain knowledge, so I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to pass a
Well,
7.
John, I hope you're like Amy. Amy was a big time insurance producer. It didn't matter how many times she was, she's not going anywhere because she brings in too much money. So, that she did 3 times. She waited 6 months. She has a team, John, under her. And I thought, man, nobody's ever going to be able to complain to her about the trials and tribulations of getting through these tests because it took her. Then she was kind of like you. She did a 66 and she failed the 7. So then we did a 663, 65, and then we went back and got a 7. She finally got it all done, John. I don't wish to take 8 months of your life, but I joke I come in, John, your life for a reason and a season. The reason is to help you pass the exams, and the season is how long that takes. And I was teasing Vince. I'm glad that our season isn't over. But when he showed up this morning, I thought he'd already tested. I thought, well, what the heck is he doing here? And now he tells me he's taking his 7. So I wish that wasn't the case. I mean, I wish he'd already had it done, but I like having Vince around. So, good energy, good vibe. So, John, what the disclosure is what? Just so we know that about you?
I guess the question is when does a person schedule that session with you to go over a test? Because I'm literally right
Oh,
on the
okay. Well, I
cusp.
just find up just to send me. I get really booked. Most of my tutoring is referral, so I don't even think you'd be able to find like the guy tomorrow. I just had to make a spot for him. So, John, just send me an email, dean@guruexamprep.com.
Copy that.
You and I can talk, and I'll make you a spot. It's not going to show up on the booking page because I'm too booked. So,
I'll
I'd have to be an early
shut up
morning.
and learn then.
Yeah, just send me an email. We'll make it happen for you.
Thank
This
you.
guy was kind of weird too. And then you got to decide what you're using it for. The guy tomorrow's taking his 24, and he decided he didn't want to do it as an intellectual mark before he tests, which is 2, 3 days out, which is, most people use it that way. He said he just wanted to kind of do it together and riff on it as we went through it, as kind of a kick off his study effort. That's not usual. But hey,
Yeah.
yeah, as we say, Vince, he went along the shared screen final. He did an opening purchase. He paid the premium. He has the choice, but not the obligation. I, Vince, am short the shared screen test. I have an obligation to do that because I collected the money. If I didn't want to do that with him tomorrow morning, I shouldn't have collected the money. So, we'll see if he's going to take the Bomba socks and let me off. Let me do it Thursday morning, perhaps, or if he's going to say, no, Dean, I want to do it tomorrow. I'll say, tell my Chris he's on his own to go get the Bomba socks. All right. As a fiduciary, an investment advisor rep owes his clients an affirmative duty. Wow. Affirmative. That means you got to go out of your way, Catherine, to make it happen, right? It's not a passive thing being a fiduciary. So that's what the word, but don't you love the NASAA exams? They're so wordy. It's like they just got so much words in there. I don't know if that has anything to do with this thing, but it does sound like Chuck, doesn't it? Chuck sounds like affirmative duty of the utmost good faith.
All the
Uh,
things you won't use in the industry at all either.
Absolutely, John. Absolutely. John, I do think it's more challenging when you come to the business, not as a tabla rasa, not as a blank slate, not as a baby broker, because John's got all kinds of stuff already in his brain housing group that's going to cloud his mind. Whereas if you're brand new right out of college, you got 4 months with pay. If you're listening to this and you're right out of college and you got 4 months of pay, don't take this in a derogatory way, but it's harder for uh, us older folks to have empathy for you when the rest of us are trying to take these tests when we have other things going on besides that. I had John, a guy who got upset with me in a tutoring session. I said, you've got to get rid of these distractions. My joke is baby brokers don't have as many distractions. And he said, Dean, my wife and kids aren't a distraction. I go,
Yes,
well,
they are.
wow. I said, they're certainly assets and not liabilities. Let me backtrack.
No.
Not saying your wife and kids aren't anything but assets. What I am saying is we got to carve out some time to get this done. All right. Full and fair disclosures of material facts, really important. No omissions of material facts. That's really huge. A material fact, Catherine, is something that would alter your investment decision. I saw a guy being interviewed, Catherine. He was asked why he didn't tell the client this information. He said, I thought I'd lose the sale. That is the all-time worst answer. I can't think of a worse answer than that. I'm supposed to say, Catherine, might alter your investment decision, but something you ought to know. This affirmative duty of disclosures is required by the investment advisor rep, that would be Catherine, in all the following situations, except he has donated funds to a nonprofit medical research that owns securities that he has recommended. Well, gee, I think that goes on all the time. The Milken Foundation, the founder of Home Depot, Ken John or something. I, I I just immediately think this is where I guess, John, it can be helpful to have a background because that happens all the time. I mean, in my world, if I'm a baby broker, maybe I don't know that. Let's see. His family has disclosure is required except. So, boy, the accepts are always challenging. So now what I want to do is go back and say, okay, what is this asking me? I'm saying I think it's asking me about disclosure. So what I like to do is maybe have an A, B, C, D on my scratch paper. And I don't think this is a material fact that needs to be disclosed to a customer. Yeah, I might share it with him, but I don't think it clouds his mind. This I think I would have to disclose, right? My family is beneficial in a private medical company that I recommend to the client. Yeah, that's a relationship should be disclosed. He receives compensation from his employing that are executed through the, yeah, we have all kinds of people in Morgan Stanley or Merrill Lynch or something. It's harder for this. But in John's case, as a life insurance guy, there's all kinds of people, that don't have the disclosure securities offered through XYZ, and they don't know that John, besides getting paid for, life insurance and fees on the investments advisory side, is also receiving commissions for selling mutual funds and other things. And so certainly we would think that John should tell us that he's also an agent of a broker dealer, right? So that's what that says in plain English, that you tell people that not only are you an investment advisor rep, you're an agent of a broker dealer and you'll be receiving commissions. Nothing wrong with commission. I was just talking to John to a guy today. He said, I think he's going to do well in our business. He's a sales guy. And, I think sales guys are great people. I'm a sales guy. Sales is fine as long as you're leading people to decisions that are in their own best interest. I think what gives a lot of sales guys a bum rap is people are leading to people to decisions that aren't in their best interest. So, yeah, I have no problem with me getting paid. I just need to disclose it. The advice he is providing is outside the scope of his brokerage employment and not under the control or supervision of your employers. Yeah. So what you're saying is this is your side hustle or something that is not related to your employment at the broker dealer. Right. So it's outside the scope of your brokerage employment. And by the way, I think that's a problem. But the question isn't about a problem. The question is disclosure except. Right. So 3 of these things are something that require disclosure. 1 is not. I call these pivot words, by the way. NASAA exams, I think these pivot words are just so important. Right. Because if you miss that, have you done that yet where you think you got a right answer? And then you missed the damn accept. You felt really good, and then you didn't downshift. All right, now you said you wanted to talk about the explanation. The investment advisor need not disclose he donated funds to nonprofits. No conflict of interest is present that requires the affirmative duty to disclose. Affirmative means you got to go out of your way to disclose something. That's a word. The fact that the institute owns securities consistent is not relevant to the relationship. The IRA has an affirmative duty to disclose on it. Yeah. I don't know, kind of a weird question. Now, what did you want to talk about the rationale on that one, Catherine?
It's actually a little bit more simple than that. It might be a stupid thing, but when they say brokerage, because they're talking about an IAR, but they're like my brokerage, and I'm like, brokerage, aren't they supposed to say IA?
Oh, well,
And
remember,
then,
if you're taking a 66, remember, you
Mhm.
are an agent of a broker dealer and an investment advisor rep. That's
Oh, so on the exam, I should think that they assume that I'm both.
66. Well, yeah, well, 66 you should, because not 65, but 66,
Oh,
right?
okay, that's helpful.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Vince is going to pass his 7, certainly. But even if Vince didn't pass his 7, his 65 will work independently. He could work at a fee-based investment advisor. Not all investment advisor reps are also agents of broker dealers. Here, I think
Okay.
Fisher Investments, for example. At Fisher
Mhm.
Investments, all those people are 65s. And boy, is he a self-righteous dude. I mean, he's always on television talking about none of us make commissions. I'm like, oh
Mhm.
my God, this. Ken, enough,
Mhm.
So they really play up their fiduciary relationship and that they,
We don't make any money to afford our $1 million houses. No.
yeah,
No.
no, but John, and what I think is kind of, you know, challenging is that, you know, he's spending hundreds of millions of dollars playing up that fiduciary responsibility in marketing. And, I'm with you, John. It makes it sound like the rest of us are engaged in a criminal conspiracy to defraud investors. So you might take exception with what I say. But I would say he does give up millions of dollars and not using an affiliated broker dealer. All right, what's our next one? Is you got another one with a QID there, or is that it?
Yeah, it was
One
the
more. Okay. 15, 19.
1519377.
Oh boy, I need to have some more caffeine here. 1519377. Same thing, just the rationale, or
Just discussing agency cross
okay.
transactions,
All right.
like
So
in your own words, kind of.
sure, sure. So I say, hey, Catherine, uh, given that I have a customer who wants to buy and a customer wants to sell the same security, I like to avoid going to a market maker. Because, if we go to a market maker, there's going to be a markdown when you sell and a markup when you buy. And, we can avoid that by doing a customer cross. And so I just want to see if that would be okay with you if we can internalize the order flow. What I mean by that, Catherine, is given the opportunity not to take your order to a market maker, I would prefer not to. And she goes, yeah, well, that sounds good. I mean, who's the loser here? I go, well, the market maker. But Catherine, the reason I'm disclosing it to you is if this comes up in the course of our business, I'll be acting in a dual agency capacity. Dual agency, Catherine, means I'm representing two parties in one trade, and those two parties have opposite expectations, right? I mean, the buyer wants to pay the least amount possible, the seller wants the most amount possible. I think we could still come up with a number, but I always joke, Catherine, about attorneys, right? Attorneys, I don't know what Jack Welch was thinking. He was divorcing his third wife, who was a big time corporate attorney. And he said, honey, why don't we share counsel here and we can save legal fees? We can pay one attorney to represent the two of us. I don't know what he was thinking. And she says, no, Jack, this isn't an amiable thing. This is an adversarial relationship. And so you go get your guy and I'll go get my guy. I can't imagine how many times, Catherine, I've seen somebody who's in hot water, and it's because of a dual agency thing that they didn't quite understand this. Frank Petrone is a legendary investment banker in our business, and he got in some hot water with a guy named James Comey. Yep, that James Comey. And, and his firm was Credit Suisse. And so the general counsel of Credit Suisse, a guy named Gary Shad, Catherine, uh, told Frank he didn't need to get his own counsel because Gary was representing both Frank and Credit Suisse. And Frank has all kinds of resources. If I were Frank, I would say, that's okay. I think I'll go get my guy just to make sure. Anyways, then they said, Catherine, to Frank, we've settled with the government. And he said, well, wonderful. And they go, no, 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 Frank, when we say we mean the firm. And the firm has settled. And as part of that settlement, we're releasing to the government all the stuff you shared with me. Oh my God. Well, now he went and got his own guy. By the way, he went all the way to Supreme Court and beat FINRA. I mean, good news. He's got resources. That's what I thought was kind of fascinating, Catherine. I mean, he's got enough money to, fight the government and go get his own attorney. So I would have said to my corporate counsel guy, hey, don't take it personal, but I think I'll go get my own representation, just to make sure what's going on. So that's what dual agency is about. So I call Vince. I say, hey, Vince, you've been following your portfolio? I've been building this position. He goes, yeah, Dean, man, that position is looking good. And what we own nearly got a double on it. I said, yeah, the asking price today is 16 and we start accumulating at 8. I'm going to buy another 1,000 shares today at 16,000. He goes, well, Dean, I'm glad you called. Actually, don't do that. I don't want to add to that position. In fact, I'd like to take some money off the table. I'd like you to sell 1,000 shares. I see, Dean, the bid is 15, so $15,000. Well, test question number 1. If my customer tells me to do something, what do I got to do? Aye, aye. Even if I don't think it's the right thing, right? I say, now, Vince, I want to make sure a couple of things here. I am not telling you to sell a security that I'm telling my other customers to buy. I'm not allowed, test question number 2, to trade against my own recommendation. I can't recommend this trade to both parties. And he says, oh, yeah, Dean, I get it. I say, now, Vince, if I take your order to the market maker, you're going to get 15 grand. And the minute I hang up, I'm calling my next customer and I'm going to buy 1,000 shares of 16. And boy, the market maker is going to love me because you're going to make $1,000 in like 2 seconds. The difference between the bid and the ask. So remember, I did talk about this idea of a customer cross. And what I'd like to do, Vince, is take it out of your account at 1550 and put it into my other customer's account at 1550. I call Catherine. I say, hey, Catherine, I've been building this position. I'm going to be building another 1,000. She goes, great, Dean. That position is working, man. What's at 16? So 16,000. I go, no, actually, I think we're going to be able to get it done for 15.5 because I'm going to do an agency cross, right? And again, the conflict here is Vince wants, by the way, I don't think this is a problem here, but are we clear there's a different thing? Vince wants to get as much as he can, and Catherine wants to pay as little as possible. So there's the conflict, right? Now, I have to have your permission by completion of the trade, which is the settlement, right? So I have to first have told you I'm going to do this in the investment advisor contract. I think usually I think of BlackRock here. They send tens of billions of dollars at BlackRock by internalizing order flow, right? If they can match people up internally, I don't know how many trillions are over there, $8 trillion, Now, some firms could do it and choose not to, just to not have to worry about potential later on people being confused. So some people, Catherine, don't internalize order flow. That's my terminology. It's not test terminology. But internalizing order flow means you're not taking the orders, somewhere. And some firms don't want to do it. All right, so let's see. All the following comply with the agency cross except. After proper written disclosure, an advisor recommends the transaction. No. I didn't recommend that Vince sell. I recommended how to best proceed on execution. I think that's where most people get hung up on this, Catherine. Right? I didn't tell Vince to sell the security and you to buy the security. No. I told Vince he should buy, but then he told me to what? Sell. And
To
now
sell. So you
I'm telling-
solicited to me, not to him.
yes, yeah. So here now I'm
Interesting.
just talking about what the best plumbing is, the plumbing to, get this trade done. That's different than a recommendation, right? Telling us how to best proceed to, save our clients from market makers. A client's consent, definitely testable. Before obtaining the client's consent to disclose, receive. Yeah, if I'm going to get commission on either side, again, that's okay, but it needs to be disclosed. Right. So if I'm going to charge Vince, $100 and I'm going to charge you $100, well, then I got to disclose that, certainly. The advisor sends an annual statement to clients that reveals the total. Well, that's true. I wouldn't worry about that as a test issue. Let's see what our friend Chuck says. Yeah, there we go. Boom. I think this is what people get hung up, is I'm not recommending the transaction in my example to Vince. Right? Are we clear? I didn't tell him to sell that. What I told him is if he's telling me to sell, here's the best way to proceed to save us some money in execution. So that's a different deal. Kind of like learning a foreign language. All right. Boom. I think you'll see an agency cross question. What would a reasoned investor consider investing in futures or forwards? So, Marco, we have had people saying the latest test specifications published by NASA do no longer include forwards, but just futures. And I haven't had that confirmed in debrief, but I call these beauty contest questions. And what I mean by that is who is the winner in the beauty contest? It's always going to be futures. And the reason it's always going to be futures is because of a couple things that make them more beautiful than forwards. In a forward, if like I'm a soybean farmer in Iowa, and I'm worried about the price of my soybeans going down by the time I harvest them, I could go to my local grain elevator and do a forward contract where I agree to deliver my soybeans in June for X number of dollars. That would be a forward. Now, the problem with that, Marco, all kinds of potential problems. How do I know my grain elevator is going to give me the money? How do they know I'm going to deliver 50,000 bushels of soybeans? That is called contraparty risk. The risk that somebody's not going to make good. And futures are regulated. in our business, that's a good word. You know, I'm kind of a libertarian, so there's people who don't like the word regulatory or regulation. You know, oh well. You know, I took mom to get her license in Arizona, where I'm off grid, and there's a lot of libertarians out here, man. Anyways, to travel, you got to have a star on your license. And Arizona says you could have a star, not have a star on your license. That's up to you. If you don't want no star, you don't need to get no star. You know, mom's 82. I don't care. I don't think she's getting on a plane anytime soon. But mom was like, because you have to have more ID to get the star thing. And
There's
I
like
thought,
such a good reason for there to be a mute button on these Zooms. It's such a good
yeah.
reason.
Yeah, there you go. But, anyways, I thought it was interesting that Arizona says, hey, your choice about how to do this. So, Marco, in our business, this idea that there's an exchange that guarantees the counterparty risk. The one I use, John, is, you know, my friends bet with their local bookies. I say, why don't you come to Vegas? There's a gaming commission. And if you make that bet here and you win, you go to the cage, you know, you're going to get your money. You know, my buddy told me he built like a 19 parlay card and he's going to win $10 million. I go, Gary, does your bookie really have $10 million? I mean, I'm not sure he does or he doesn't, right? So that would be the number one reason, Marco. And then on the elevators part, they got to worry about the quality and the quantity and all that kind of stuff. So that's why you would do futures instead of forwards, and that is the test questions. As an investment advisor rep, using futures to speculate or to hedge is the better way to proceed. There's more liquidity, right? You can't sell the soybean forwards contract. I mean, the grain elevator could sell it, but it's going to be hard to sell it. You know, the soybean guy, it's hard to transfer that contract. Futures contracts can be, are fungible and can be traded, which is a good thing as well. So that's the main point. Now, futures on NASAA exams are, I think, even easier than options. Because Marco, unlike the seven where there's calls and puts, that's not true in futures as it relates to your exam. So in terms of the exam, other than knowing forwards are better than futures are better than forwards, the other question is just up or down on whatever's in the question, right? So if you think soybeans are going up, you go long the futures. If you think soybeans are going down, you go short the futures. And so that's, I think, pretty easy. Now, up or down depends your perspective, whether good news or bad news. This is Vince's point, Catherine's point about whether you're a hedger or a speculator. But right, you know, you could still figure that out. If I'm a soybean farmer, if I'm hedging, I'm afraid the price is going down. So I short the soybean futures, and I hope I make in the futures market at least a little bit of what I'm going to lose in the spot or cash market. Right. So it's either going to be a hedge or speculation based on the price. Hershey, for example, right? Hershey would be afraid of cocoa prices going up or cocoa prices going down. Going up, right? And if I'm the chief financial officer, true story of Hershey, I say to the CEO, hey, good news, I had a hedge in place. So even though we're getting killed in the spot cash market for cocoa, I've got some cocoa futures that I went long that are up in price, and that can offset some of our loss, right? So that's the second part of that. As a way to hedge, well, I just brought up the hedge, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
because I did take the 66 a week ago for the first time, and I
yeah.
missed it by 3 points. And
Oh,
two of those questions had to do with
I
futures.
hate those scores, man. You know, I'm dating myself, but we used to not make you wait 30 days, Marco. And in those days, I would just tell you, cue the damn thing up again and just stay down there until you got a draw. So now, you got to wait 30 and then three times, you got to wait 6 months. But, you know, it is what it is. Now, in terms of your point about the hedge, I gave you, think input output on the hedge too, right? Cocoa is an input for Hershey's. I gave you the soybean guy, right? What about Kikomin? Kikomin makes soy sauce. So hedge means if you're wrong, right? So what would Kikomin, who makes soy sauce, they'd be afraid that soybeans go up,
Interesting.
right? So we go long the futures, right? And again, the hero is the CFO. I go, hey, I've got a hedge in place. Uh, if I'm a Delta, what am I afraid of? I'm afraid that jet fuel is going to go up. So I go long the oil futures. But, John's an insurance guy. And, this is kind of like insurance and may or may not be necessary. Right. So, maybe my CEO goes, Dean, you put in the hedge and we didn't need it. And I go, well, you don't buy insurance because you plan on wrecking, right? You buy it just in case, right? So the hedge may or may not,
You buy it for way more reasons than that, though.
there you go. There you go. So let's see what our next one is. I'm getting an 80 on Notman. Vince, fantastic. Uh, I got a little bromance going on with Brian Marks right now. So, I got two Brians in my life, Brian Lee and Brian Marks. Um, and my God, how as well. How far should I buy and take Brian's? Brian's exams, I think, are the best correlation to the actual exam.
Okay.
So I would use that as kind of my last kind of intellectual inventory, 2, 3 days out.
2, 3 days.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
was telling Jen and her test geek, I told her I would just on the night before and morning of read Brian's questions and his answers because some of them are spot on. Right. So that's when I would do it. I would be my final mark, 2, 3 days out. Say,
Okay.
okay, good news or bad news. I had a young lady. I feel bad. I just told you, I think Brian's has the best correlation to the actual exam. And she was really frustrated because she wasn't getting good scores on Kaplan. And then she bought a different test vendor and her scores immediately went to 85. And I go, well, that's not a good thing. I mean, I know you feel better, but what do we know about the correlation there? I mean, maybe it's because that particular test printer. Anyways, they do me a favor. Was getting 65 on Kaplan. She got a 65 on Test Geek, and she got a 65 on the exam. So I felt bad that instead of powering through, I told Jen, I don't hope I'm not talking out of school, Jen. I said, let go of the Kaplan hate, man. You got to let it go. It's not going to do you any good, and you got to
Good
move
advice.
on, right? You got to matriculate, right? So, anyways, I think you need to overcome that rather than getting. And I know Jen wouldn't do this. Jen wouldn't go buy some different practice test just to feel good, right? I mean, we're trying to take that test. So, I would use Brian as my final mark, right? Sure, Jen, is that 66 again? Is that 66 or 65? Or was that who was that that wanted to go over that? I'm sorry.
It's 66.
Okay, cool. What's the QID?
1614225.
4255. Okay, let me find you guys. 1614255.
1614225.
25. There we go. Okay, that's what's going on. Boom. Okay, it's 1614225. It's not coming up. Is it part of a midterm or a mastery?
Oh, it was my mastery.
Oh, you want to bring it up on your screen? You're welcome to bring it up on your screen if you like.
No, that's all right. I was
Okay.
just gonna, it's about discount. It's
Well, we're going to talk later too. We'll bring it up. We can bring it up then.
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
And you show an easy way to do an option dump sheet that makes sense. Well, I'm not sure about that, John. I mean, I don't call it a dump sheet. I call it a matrix. And so boom, boom, boom. I say there are two types of options, calls and puts. You can either buy them or sell them. And so that means we have four basic option positions.
The reason I ask the question is every time I go in there, I try to write it out as fast as possible. And I
Well,
think
slow down, slow down. I wouldn't think fast is not necessary. You shouldn't run out of time on the test. You might run out of right answers, but not time. We have calls. Right, so we'll put calls up here. We have puts. We have two types of contracts, calls and puts. You can either go long or short. And so that means we have four basic option positions. And I always think that option positions, exist outside of the securities industry. I wanted to buy this car on a when issued basis. This car does not exist presently. And so I went to the car dealer. I said, hey, listen, I'd like to pay you a premium. And, people know there's got to be some kind of catch. He said, well, Dean, what's the catch? People don't give you money unless there's some kind of catch. I say, for this premium, I would like to have the choice to buy the first one of those cars off the boat from Japan for $25,000. And he said, well, Dean, manufacturer suggested retail price is 24. I said, I know that. And if I thought you were going to sell them for 24, I wouldn't be offering you $3,000 right now to sell it to me at 25. And every contract has two parties. I was joking, right? I am two parties to my shared screen final tomorrow, right? There's a guy who's long that shared screen final, a guy who's short. My family gets mad at me because I go, I'm short a shared screen final. And they say, well, you stop using securities industry terms with your family. Yeah. I say, oh, hey, I'm not short today. Anyways, here you receive the premium. And again, I think the analogy would be an insurance company, right? I pay my insurance company some money and they agree that for that money, if something happens, they will make good. If you didn't want to be obliged, you shouldn't collect the money. We were joking about, Kaplan and my friend Mark Esposito. He's a Kaplan employee. I am not. And I think, sometimes people at Kaplan don't realize that. And, the person who wants me to cover class are going to say, Dean, you're teaching a class this afternoon for an instructor who's out at 1 o'clock. I go, oh, you better slow your roll there, my friend. I'm not obliged to do anything for you. I'm not a Kaplan employee. I want you to back up and ask me politely, might I be willing to help out? Call me a 3-year-old, but I'd like to be asked politely. Anyways, in my example of the automobile, the dealer called me. He said, hey, Dean, the car's here. I go, it is. He says, yeah, I don't want to talk to you. I said, well, you're in Long Beach. I'm in San Francisco. I'm on my way. There it is. Oh, it's beautiful. And he says, Dean, I'd like you to go away. I'd like to get rid of the obligation. I said, oh, you'd like to trade the contract. I got a problem for you. I want to exercise. I'm the guy in control. I said, but what would you give me for the contract? He said, Dean, I'll give you $5,000. I said, well, you must think I'm new. You just told me you had an offer for 32. My contract to buy at 25 with the car at 32 is worth $7,000.
Hmm.
And if I was going to walk, I'd want at least what? $7,000. And I'd like some extra for my time. I said, but unfortunately for you, Mr. Car Dealer, I'm exercising. So I bought the car for 25. I paid 3 for the contract, so I'm out 28. As long as that car is about 28, everything's fine. Now, in our time together, the underlying interest is not an automobile. It's a stock. But contracts exist outside the securities industry. Right? I always love in Hollywood, and they say, I've got an option contract. I got a choice to turn that book into a movie. And my contract to turn the book into a movie expires in 6 months, man. I got to get my financing in order. I forget who Steven Spielberg's wife is, but I felt bad. She was producing a movie and she had an option contract, and all they wanted to talk to her about was Steven. And I could tell she was getting exasperated because she was really trying to chat up her own movie project. And then, the person, well, why don't you just ask your husband to give you the money? That was pretty rude. Anyways, puts exist outside the securities industry. I was going to lease a Audi R8. It's a poor man's Lamborghini. And the guy, dealer told me that at the end of the lease, the car is going to be worth 120 grand. I go, really? I said, listen, you and I have opposite expectations about the value of that car at the end of the lease. Particularly since I'm the guy who's going to be driving it. I said, listen, I'd like to give you $4,000. He says, what's the catch? People don't give you money unless there's some kind of catch. I say, for this $4,000, I'd like to be able to put the R8 to you for 120. He goes, well, Dean, what if it's worth 120 or more? I said, well, if it's 120 or more, 140, I'm going to sell in the auto trader. I'm going to stick it to you, at 120. If it's worth more than that, you get to keep the $4,000. Again, it's like my insurance company, right? As long as I don't file a claim, they get to keep the money. Neener, 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 right? So I'm going to pay a premium. Boom. And whether you want to have a choice to buy or choice to sell, if you want to be in control, choices cost money. And again, this is going to be the choice to sell the stock. And whether you want a choice, as I said, to buy or sell, choices cost money. And again, to make this work, we have two parties, right? If I'm a putter, then there's got to be a put-e. I had a young lady in class, and I said, okay, so I'm going to stick it to him. I have 1040 puts. I have a choice to sell 1,000 shares at 40, stocks at 20. I'm going to buy it at 20 and I'm going to stick it to him at 40. And she said, that's the most unchristian thing I've ever heard of. I would never stick it to anybody. And I go, well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, then probably you shouldn't be trading options, I guess. Or it's kind of like people come to Vegas and have a problem with gambling. I'm like, well, nobody made you walk into the casino, you know? Yeah, maybe you can go to dinner and watch a show. You don't have to gamble if you don't want to.
Or read the Bible a little bit more. They stick it
There
to
you go. Yeah, there you go. My dad is a evangelical missionary guy, and he's come around a little bit because now we don't have as much pushback. But I said, Dad, Jesus' first miracle was turning the water into wine.
guy like to party.
Yeah, and my dad was his crowd is so weird. They go, "What was non-alcoholic wine?" I go, "Really? I missed that part. Where was that? I don't remember that part." I said, "Hey, you guys like Martin Luther, right?" They go, "Oh yeah, I love Martin Luther." I go, "Well, he drank a lot of beer."
Hmm.
In other countries, we'd be.
This Zoom could turn into a 2-hour conversation. After
Of
that.
course, of course. Well, we're having fun today. I've lightened up my load a little bit, so I have more time to spend doing these kind of things. I think of myself, John, as a retired broker, so I've been pretty blessed. You know, I I think it's funny sometimes when I get into it with people because I'm not really a teacher tutor guy who is doing this for a living, which sometimes means my sensibilities aren't as good as they should be in terms of customer satisfaction. I'm like, hey, I told you I like Vince. I like Jen, but if I don't like working with somebody, I'm pretty prepared to say, you know what? Good
We're,
news for
we're
you.
done, right?
There's other people. Maybe there's a better fit elsewhere. Uh, right, suitability, that's called suitability. All right, so let's say at the end of the lease, the car's 80 and the guy's sitting on his lot and he's wondering if I'm going to stick it to him. So if Dean has a choice to sell the R8 at 120 and the R8 is 80, should he have the expectation that I'm going to exercise? Absolutely, Vince. If the contract has intrinsic value at expiration, the contract is going to be exercised. Vince, very testable. This example I'm giving you is European style. I can't just show up anytime with the R8 and stick it to him. I could only stick it to him at the end.
Mm.
That's called European style. American style events means I can show up anytime and make him perform on the contract. Equity options, Vince, very testable, are American style. So Vince, don't tell anybody, but I went to buy 1,000 shares of $20 stock and I didn't have the $20,000. And I was afraid that by the time I had the $20,000, the stock would be $30, $40. I did have $2,000. And so I bought 10 of the 20 calls for 2. And then when I got the 20 grand, I exercised in September, even though those were October contracts. And I was kind of laughing because I know that guy's going to be pissed, right? Because he's going to have to deliver 1,000 shares at 20 in September, not what? October. And then what is his broker going to tell him? Well, you should have read the OCC disclosure document that tells you that equity options are American style and the holder can exercise what?
At any
Any time, right? And then the broker calls the client, says, hey, you got to deliver 1,000 shares at 20. He says, why me? We say, well, we do it here randomly. We assign exercises randomly or another fair method or, FIFO, first guy wrote the contract, first guy out, So, by the way, a lot of your option questions aren't necessarily strategies. It's the backstage mechanics of this stuff. Now, I told you one thing I would add to this matrix, and it's a common kind of a thing, is whenever you collect money, the best case is you keep it,
That's it.
right? And so, you agree to be a potential victim. Nobody victimizes you and you keep the money. And this sounds like a bad thing, but this is a good thing. The most you can lose when you buy an option is the premium, right? So that's kind of a common thread that runs through this. And so we'll put that over here. So good news, the most I can lose is what I paid. So I told you I bought those 40 puts and that was 4 points. That's $4,000. And as a bear goes, that's a smart bear. Because if Dean's wrong, I'm just going to lose $4,000. There's a lot of stupider things I could do, like short the stock or do naked calls or whatever. So one of the advantages of buying options is that if you're wrong, you just lose your premium. Right. In fact, the car dealer told me that. He goes, well, Dean, what if I do sell it at 24? I go, well, if you're going to sell it to me for 24, obviously I'm not going to exercise a contract to buy at 25 a car you'll sell to me at 24. You know, I just lose my $3,000 and, you know, I take the car, right? So we could fill in the rest of this, John, but what I suggest you do is when you come to the exam site, you get 2 sheets of paper. And as you know, the dry erase paper doesn't lend itself well to this. But what I do is I just like to take a sheet of paper and fold it in fours. And boom, and then I got my matrix. And if you can just do one quadrant of the
Can't
matrix,
take any paper in, Dean.
yeah, that's right. And if you can just do one quadrant, then you can unfold this thing, right? Because you know that whatever you put here, this is the opposite, right? It's not a box with 4 squares. And you know here, right? These have some similarities, right? Oh, I got this one messed up. This should be a buy the stock. So that's the other reason you want to make sure you got the opposite, right? I'm just reviewing this thing. This should be a buy. The put he has to buy the stock. So let's fix that. So
Thank
there
you.
you go. Right. And then if you were going to be doing spreads, there's a spread, right? Boom. Long and short, the same type of contract. There's a put spread. I call these like sandboxes you're playing in. You know, here we could, if we do this, let me get rid of this. Boom. If I do this, and this, that's a long straddle. If I do this and this, that's a short straddle. So that matrix, you can do a lot of things with that matrix. All right, what else that we got going on? Let's see what we got else going on. Would you, an investor, consider futures? Could you go over capital? I think we did. Did we try and go over 161? I think we did. Option dump sheet we did. Brian's leads option videos. Yeah. Vince, Brian calls it. I call it we get Brian and I talk about this all the time. Options matrix, I call it. I think he calls it the aerobics chart or something chart. It's the same basic thing. One of the reasons Brian and I don't mind collaborating is we're pretty much on the same page about how we think things should be presented. We talked after an SPOD has his own unique way of doing options. It works and whatever works. So just be careful. You don't get too many voices in your head. You got to make sure you just get something that, makes sense and, that makes sense. There we go. Thank you. You're welcome. Definitely Test Geek has only two option videos. Well, Vince, what I would tell you on his YouTube is free content. He doesn't have a lot. And even on his paid supplement, he doesn't have a lot, but it's by design. So me, I don't try and do any kind of a distillation. I got 1,600 videos and I have them in, I hope, a way that you can access the cram course or you can access the options playlist. But, there's abundance there, not scarcity. And Brian and his trying to do distillation. I'm not trying to do distillation. I'm just putting stuff up there. Eric, is that a 66 or 65? Which one is that? Eric, you out there?
So that's a 66.
Okay, let me go find the thing here. Boom.
Yeah.
Oh man, I killed my Q bank. Let me go get the Q bank.
Yeah, I passed my SIE, my 7, but for some reason the 66 is giving me hassle. I don't get it.
NASA exams are tough. I mean, people, you're not alone. I mean, I don't, that probably doesn't make you feel any better, but you're not alone. That people have a nice pep in their step when they pass their 7, and I think rightfully so. And, they perhaps have a little hubris. I don't know, go into that thing and some of it looks familiar, but some of it is much different.
Yeah.
Let me,
I was like Marco. I got a 67 and then I got a 68.
yeah, you just got to stick with it. You just got to stick with it. My people invest with you because they like you and they trust you, not because you can pass tests. I mean, my best broker used to use it as part of his presentation. He'd go and say, "Hey, if anybody knows this stuff, it's me. I had to take this damn test 5 times." I wouldn't suggest we do that. But
Dean, I met a guy who failed it 9 times at a conference
oh,
weeks ago. I was
Wow.
in San Diego. The guy said I failed it 9 times. I found out I was dyslexic. I was like,
Okay.
oh, and Charles Schwab is dyslexic. I have an old girlfriend who's a genius, but she got misdiagnosed as being slow when she's actually not. And I used to drive me nuts because she didn't put it out there, but every once in a while somebody would say something so stupid to her.
Yeah.
And I would want to, take her out of the closet and say, "Do you realize that she's asking because she's great at memory. She has like a photographic memory.
Mhm.
So people don't realize that
Mhm.
that's what she's done. That, it was, I think it was like, have you read the book? And they don't know, for her to read the book would be just be crazy because,
Torture. Yeah.
I love to read and I just can't even imagine that. Anyway, so yeah, that's a real challenge for sure. I think they're better now at diagnosing dyslexia, uh, you know, properly. But I know in the old
Mhm.
days, like Schwab and Deirdre, my friend, back in those days, they misdiagnosed somebody and, yeah, I think Schwab isn't a dumb person either. I mean, so it's a challenge. They're pretty good at accommodations, and I'm not a medical person, John, so it hurts my heart sometimes because I'm not so sure the accommodation is helpful. Like I had one day guy, he had ADHD, and they let him take it as long as he wanted. And I'm not a medical person, so I had to tell him. I said, "But man, I don't going into the cave to slay the dragon and being in there 9 hours.
Yeah, that's not
I
good.
can't think that's helpful. That they give
Probably
you an
gonna
extra
overthink
five
all of his
hours to hang out
answers.
with the dragon. So, um, I would prefer to kind of just suck it up and have some kind of a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
All right, is this the right question? Can you see my screen? Eric, is this the question?
Yes, it is.
Okay. As appropriate to the scale and complexity of a firm's business, elements of an effective practice framework for managing conflicts of interest include all the following except. So, as I said to Catherine, what I like to do on these questions is just rephrase it in my own mind before I attempt to answer it. So
Okay.
what I like to do is say, okay, three of these things are effective, one of these things is not. Right. So, as I
Okay.
said, I might have an A, B, C, D on my scratch paper and simply read each one and put effective, ineffective next to it. Maybe I can't do that, Marco. Maybe I end up putting a question mark. I say, I'm not sure that's effective or not. But at least I can kind of get going and attacking the question maybe through process of elimination. Ensuring the firm remains solvent for the protection of customers, employees alike. Okay, well, I read that and I go, well, that sounds okay, but let me read the question again. Managing conflicts of interest. Going bankrupt isn't a conflict of interest, right? Conflicts of interest are where your firm's goals and needs might be different than your clients. So it's an answer to a question not asked. A.
Mm,
See what B says. Establishing mechanisms to identify conflicts. The question was indeed about conflicts. And so B seems like it's going to be something that is effective. Right? I'm looking
right.
for three things that are effective. Avoiding severe conflicts. It says conflicts. The question is about conflicts. D, training staff to identify conflicts. So we got apple, 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 orange. We got conflict, conflict, conflict. I don't see conflict anywhere in A, right?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, let's see. Managing conflicts is not enough money to remain solvent. Well, there you go. That's not one of Chuck's better explanations. But the way I would have, again, I think it's this on NAS exams is so important. In the previous, I don't know, Eric, when you joined us, but I was going over a couple questions with Catherine.
Yeah.
On NAS exams, boy, the pivot words are so important.
Yeah.
I told
In
you,
taking
Vince.
these exams, it feels almost like it's almost like a reading concept and like a vocabulary concept.
Well, it is, and I
And
told you. Besides Vince, who's one of my favorite students of late, I have another lady who I always chat up, and her. Can you imagine this? Her primary language is Mandarin. I
that
was laughing, and she thought I was laughing at her because she was, telling me how difficult it was. And she goes, "You're laughing at me." I go, "No, I'm laughing with you. I think it's funny that you're telling me that you're plugging these words into your Google Translator and nothing in Mandarin comes back." And I think that's funny. She goes, "Why do you
jeez.
think that's funny?" I said, "Because I don't think this is in English to begin with." So,
No, not at
before you
all.
even put
Not
in
at
your
all.
Google Translator, you got to first put it into English to put it into the Google Translator, right? So,
Sucker for
Dean, if I,
pain, I
Dean,
guess. Jeez.
yeah,
Dean, if I can say one thing to this
yeah,
group, I think I might be the oldest guy in the group
yeah.
besides yourself. There's a lot of guys in the industry. Catherine, as far as experience, I got 20 years owning a firm. I'll say it this way. There's a lot of guys and gals that have a lot of initials next to their names that can't sell. and
Well,
they
that's
get all
exactly
the
right.
licenses and all the other stuff. So just remember that. Pass the exam, move forward.
Yeah, hey John, yeah, no, I've been excited the last couple times because of the guys who are making lateral transfers. I got a couple guys this week, and they're top sales guys, and I said, you have a unique advantage because you realize that what it's about to go find customers, and some people are spending too much time not realizing. Now, not everybody taking the test is going into production, but our job is to find money, move money, and place money. You don't get paid until you that last step, moving the money,
Yeah.
and
I
so.
get two interns I hired who passed the 7, the 66, and they're looking at me as their boss going, why can't you pass it? I'm like,
Well, no, no. There's very bright men. I tell you, you can't get your self-esteem wrapped up in these tests. It's just a terrible thing to get your self-esteem wrapped up in. And you, John and I are old enough to know there are so many exceptions to people who, and I don't know if John's going to agree with this, but when we gave scores, if I got a guy who got over 90, John, I'd say, I think I should fire you now. And they say, why? I said, well, two reasons. One, if you got over 90, all you've proven is you're big a jerk as the guy who wrote the test. And I've been spending a lot of time with you, probably more time than my family. And God knows I don't want to spend time with people like that.
God, I have to
Second,
explain every
how am
concept
I
to
going to
you in the world.
supervise you if you're smarter than me? You're always going to be one step ahead of me.
Yep.
And so I think I should just get rid of you now.
Yep.
Or, when a guy gets like a low 80, I go, hey, that's a good score. I mean, you're going to be good intermediary between the smart guys and the, not so smart guys. So.
Yep.
All
I'll
right.
take
So
20 from
easy
every day.
way. I don't have an easy way on that, Vince. I would just know that more than 25, very testable, is retail communication. Two test questions, that's one. And then what follows from that is pre-distribution by a principal approval, right? So 24 has to approve it. And then I would know that correspondence is 25 or less in a 30-day period, both of them 30 days. And what follows from that is pre or post distribution. I, the principal, can decide whether I want to approve it pre or post. The definitions, Vince, are testable, and this idea of principal approval when is testable as well. 3 or 4 questions on me. Yeah, it's definitely there. Definitely there. I paid tutors this with you. Oh, well, there we go, Catherine. Well, great. So remember, you, Catherine, also qualify for paid office hours. I'll put one up. And there's 2 free things. These jam sessions for anybody. So whether, Catherine, you paid for tutoring or not, you're welcome to join us on a jam session. And then the office hours are for people who've done paid tutoring. And I'll put one of those up, and you're welcome to join us besides your regular tutoring session. It's very much like this. Sometimes it's just one person shows up. It could be you, and then it's a free hour tutoring. Or it could be, 5 people or 10 people, whatever. I try and cap these at 5 or 6 just so we don't end up with, 30 people.
Sorry, when is that? You
Jen?
said put it up where?
I haven't put it up on the class tab yet.
Oh,
So
class tab. Got
yeah, I
it.
have to put it up. What I mean, I don't have an organized time when I do jam sessions or paid office hours. I just put them on the class tab. I look at my schedule and
Of
see.
your website. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I think exactly. Jen, I'll see Jen. I guess I already missed her. I'll see her later today. It's not when I am tutoring with you, it's not a transaction, it's a relationship. So, Jen is going on Thursday, so I don't abandon you and I don't make you book more tutoring just to check in and guard your psyche. Now that she's gone, I'll tell you she was in a bad spot this morning. Bitching about Kaplan and finally tough love. I had to say, hey, are you done? That's really not going to do us any good between now and Thursday. You need to let that go. So finish up the rant and let's get busy. Okay, yeah, let's go. Good. I don't think I put away my Kaplan Q bag. I hope not. Let's see. 1-5. Let me get this. Boom. Chat 152.
How much time do you want before scheduling exam? If you're gonna tutor
Yeah, just give me that email, or I can do it before we hang up here. I can do it if you want. Let's see, and then we can just settle up when we do it. Ooh, I like this one. Counterintuitive. This is a high end, Eric. So I wouldn't beat yourself up on this. This is a question about capitalization. And we should know that capitalization of a corporation consists of equity and debt. You don't have to issue debt if you don't want to, but you always are going to have common stock at least. And so if on our balance sheet we have a lot of debt, then we're going to be interest rate sensitive. I think the easiest way to think about this is your own personal situation. I am not interest rate sensitive because I have no debt. So it doesn't matter to me about what rates are doing in terms of being a borrower. You know, my brother has debt, and he's always telling me about his adjustable rate debt that's going up or down. You know, that could mean a big difference in his life about whether he's paying 18% or 5% or whatever that happens to be. So utility stocks, besides knowing they're defensive, that's very testable. No, they're defensive. They deliver products and service, so resilient to the business cycle. Nobody wants to go back to the Stone Age. Might cut back on usage, but I'm not going to give up my power, right? They also have a large amount of debt. It's counterintuitive, but that means they trade on equity. So when you say a company trades on equity, it means it has a little bit of equity on the balance sheet, a lot of debt. So utility stocks are certainly interest rate sensitive. For the most part, growth stocks like Nvidia doesn't have any debt on its balance sheet. You know, Alphabet doesn't have debt on their balance sheet. Microsoft has a little bit just to prove they can, you know. They're AAA. I joke, you know, AAA is what you pay to borrow money if you don't need to borrow any. But in general, those growth stocks, Netflix, they are not going to have debt on the balance sheet. You should have been struggling with preferred stock being interest rate sensitive because you should definitely know that if interest rates go up, preferred stocks are going what? Down because they're a fixed income investment vehicle. So even though it's equity on the issuer's balance sheet, it's a bond in the portfolio because like a bond, it's a fixed income investment vehicle. So Erica, maybe the challenge was Roman numeral one. I hope you weren't struggling on Roman numeral three.
Yeah, I chose. Well, I knew for a fact that preferred stock was the option, was the
Good, good.
choice,
Good.
and
If you've been with
then
me for a while, Eric, you know that I always joke when anybody asks you about economics, finance, or investments, you want to sound smart, you should say it has a lot to do with interest rates. And if you just shut up, you sound good. People say, what about them? You say they
okay,
fluctuate. They say that good news or bad news. You say it depends. And
it could go either way.
there you go. Utility stocks are interest rate sensitive because we just answered the question because of all the
Yeah,
balance sheet that they're going to have to continue to refinance.
yeah. I didn't really think about how leveraged they are. That
Leverage is
it,
financial speed, making a little money do a lot. So I say,
Mhm.
hey, how leveraged was the purchase of your home? How, Eric, did you capitalize the purchase of your home? How much equity did you put up? And how
Mhm.
much debt did you issue? You say, Dean, I put down no down payment. No down payment, no equity. Woo!
You're
You are
highly
highly
leveraged.
leveraged.
Yep.
Now, that good
You're,
news,
you're
that means the house goes up 10%. I don't know what's a return on a zero investment, right?
right.
I say, hey, I put down 20%, I borrowed 80%. Or maybe I paid
That's
cash,
very
right?
minimally at leverage then.
Yeah, yeah. Leverage is again this idea of how much debt you got going on.
Right.
So if I
How
say,
much control the bank has over you.
well, my dad, the missionary, right? The borrower is or the servant of the lender, Proverbs 11:13 or something. I don't know what proverb it is. But anyways, what I would say here is that again, leverage is also making money at supercharged speeds or losing money at supercharged speeds. So it's not necessarily I'm joking about proverbs. There are people who think the leverage is evil. Leverage is a financial tool. How you use that tool, is good or bad. That's a different question, right?
The only
All
thing
right.
faster than debt
Well,
or
yeah.
interest rates
Remember, like
would
I said,
be
if you get stuck,
owing
just
on
go
an
back.
option.
Go back to the something that is understandable, right? Let's just go back. Vince buys. We all buy houses in the same neighborhood.
Mhm.
You, I, and Vince. We all buy. The floor plans are exactly the same. As fungible houses can be, they're not, but they pretty. I walk into Vince's house, I can find the bathroom. It's in the
Yeah.
same place as mine. Anyways, we all paid $500,000 for these houses. Vince put up 250, borrowed 250. You put down 1050, borrowed 490 or 450. I put down 20%, 100 grand, I borrowed 400 grand. Now, if all of our homes go up in value to 600, we all sell. We all make $100,000. However, you put up what, 50 to make 100? Woo. Vince put up 250 to make 100, and what I put up? I put up 100 to make 200. So that's what the leverage is. It's the percentage return. Now, if homes go down 100 grand, You know, Vince isn't wiped out. I'm not wiped out, but you're going to be wiped out in terms of the equity. So that concept is it goes both directions.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it looks like that's it for today. Okay, good session, guys. Thanks for joining us. As I said, I will put up another jam session, and Catherine, I will put up a office hours. If you're watching the replay, this is an offer only made to the people in this session. Marco, Eric, John. I think John is going to be qualifying because he wants to do a shared screen. Vince, I don't know if you spent any money with me, did you? I apologize if I don't remember you spending any money with me.
I just threw Kaplan.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, that offer is open to Kaplan. So Vince, you do qualify for the paid office hours as well. Catherine, I do a Series 66 lab class with Kaplan. Kaplan hires Guru Exam Prep LLC, which is me, to do a 66 class. There's one's coming up in July that may not work for your thing, but you're welcome to join us for that. And I'll put both those up. I'll put up an office hour. I'll put up a jam session. John, you can either send me an email if you want. I'll pull up my schedule and we can put you on the schedule right now for a shared screen practice test, whatever works for you. All right.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dean.
Anything else?
Thanks
Remember,
so much.
hey, Brian, Vince, did you see my ticker? I asked Brian if I could have permission to put up his little thing. You take the test. Don't let the test take you. So now on my ticker, I have inch by inch. Your exam is a cinch. And I told Brian, I said, hey, Brian, I can put one more text message up on my ticker. And here's what I'm thinking. I said, but hey, I don't want to, have him watch my ticker go by. And there's his little, I go, hey, can I put that up there? He goes, yeah, go for it. I go, right. So I can't wait till tonight because we'll get to see his little, you take the test, don't let the test take you go by. All right. Anything else for today? And then Eric, I'm also trying, Eric, to do as much as I can in terms of offering some free access to folks who may not have the $300 an hour for the tutoring. So that's a way to avail yourself of
Okay.
access to the jam
I greatly
sessions,
appreciate that.
the office hours. And man, I'm a little jealous of that look you got there, Eric, man. You and John are a handsome men, man. I got to tell you. I mean, I
Well,
like
thank
it.
you.
Yeah. It looks
Hey,
like
real quick, team.
yeah, John doesn't look like he has much product going on his hair there.
I get all my hair care products from that company.
Yeah,
Probably a little less.
hey, there you go. Yeah, what's up, Catherine?
Just real quick, how should I prepare for our tutoring session? What do
Well,
you
I
think we're
like
gonna-
when you come, there's a session when you register, it tells you your agenda. I mean, I can
Yeah.
talk about things
It's not
I want to talk about.
Mhm.
QIDs, you should be using tutoring to plug any gaps you have. So if you feel like there's some gaps, and then if not, we can decide what our agenda is going to be when we get to the tutoring session. But
Yeah.
sometimes people come with a great agenda of what they want to talk about, QIDs or subject areas. What did we do the other day?
Catherine, the best way Dean's worked with me on that is to print out these outlines from
Yeah,
or
yeah,
from
yeah. We can
NASA
work our way through
and go
that.
through it
We work our way
before.
through that.
Okay.
What I like is when this guy had what was his hole? He had a hole. I think it was client investment risks, and we just spent the hour plugged the hole. So
Okay.
it might be all over the place, but it's great if you have like a particular thing that we can
Mhm.
plug, right? So
Do you have a certain test prep that you recommend?
yeah, I recommend Kaplan except for like 24s. I recommend Notman. But what I was going to say, Catherine, too, is when we're doing the tutoring, we can always add a session if we need. I will never abandon someone towards the end. I mean, like Jen, she's testing Thursday, so it's not like Dean's going to disappear. We'll make sure we drag her across the finish line one way or another. But the guy who had that hole to plug is easier than if it's all over the place and we're trying to, and sometimes that is what it is, right? We got to bring everything above par, and that's a little more work than this guy who I said, it's counterintuitive. I said, well, this is cool because this is the hole. We know where it's at. And that's what's great about Kaplan, John's performance tracker. It helps you identify where you need to spend more time rather than trying to guess about it. And it just hurts my heart when people aren't using that performance tracker for remediation. I'd get fired if I worked at the exam site because, I'd say, well, what do you know? He says, well, I'm going to find out. I go, well, that's bad. You should find out before you get here what you do and don't know. Right? Now, we're not trying to mindlessly do practice tests. I think that's a misinterpretation. And are some OGs out there who think, oh yeah, you just do 6 practice tests a day and then you go down there and no, we're doing practice tests to get a mark in intellectual inventory to identify remediation. So even in Jen's case, I said, I don't want you doing more than one a day. You should be spending as much time on remediation of that exam, that practice test, as you did taking it. And so we're not mindlessly trying to take practice tests. We're trying to get a mark. What we're trying to find out is whether Vince is at risk or not. Right. And I told you, I'm very rarely surprised. I was surprised when he missed his 66 because I thought he knew it well enough. So very rarely am I surprised. But in his case, I said, hey, listen, you know that well enough. I think you could go take a 63, 65. But we would like to have a good idea before we go down there what your margin of safety is.
Mm.
I told Jen today, right? She's going Thursday. So I told Jen today and tomorrow, all we're trying to do is increase our margin of safety. We're not trying to learn brand new things. We're just trying to tighten things up. I said, tomorrow, the days of cramming are over. So, tonight, she said, I'm thinking about having a glass of wine on the river. I said, I think that's a great idea. You should just relax, home, let the 66 come to you, be the 66. And then she said, my husband asked if he wanted to, she wanted him to go on the walk. And then she said, he looked at her and he said, well, you didn't ask me. Okay, my bad. So, nothing against, I told you, I had a guy got upset with me. I didn't mean to say his wife and kids were distractions. I was just saying, hey, you got to carve out the time and you got to be conscious of guarding your psyche. John, I had a person and she has direct reports. And so, she's got, a husband, kids, and, 25 people that she supervises. And, you know, as much as
Excuse me.
possible, she's got to hide away. I said, hey, listen, I know you have the resources and I'm not being facetious here. Maybe you need to go get a hotel a couple blocks away from the exam site and spend these last couple days, you and your study materials, cloistered from all the potential distractions and say, hey, I'll just put out the fires when I get back, let them burn until I get here. Don't be, I wish I had people sometimes who don't help people. And, I had a manager I took exception with, and I told him, I said, why did you even tell the person that? I mean, there's nothing that they could do about that anyways. So why cloud their mind with that? Why don't you just wait till they take the damn test and then when they come back, cloud their mind with stuff that has nothing to do with passing their exam, right? So now I know that's not always possible because sometimes people are, required to put in the work too. I mean, I have a person who only can study like 2 hours a day and still has to keep, all the balls in the air. So everybody's in a different testing situation. But as much as you can, try and put yourself, if nobody else is going to help put you in the right position, make sure you're giving thought to putting yourself in the right position to make your mark. And that comes from, best practice. Brian and I and Esposito, we all know what best practices are, Catherine. And so we do get aggravated when people aren't going to do best practice because we say, okay, well, if you're going to go rogue and be a lone wolf, well, let's see how that works for you. We're still wishing you the best. We're still hoping you pass your exam. We're not wishing it. We're not casting any spell on them. I had social media is so exasperating sometimes. I had a guy today in social media on his SIE, Catherine, who told me that my answer to the option question was not correct. And I said, boy, that takes a lot of chutzpah. I kind of respect you for being that kind of a willful person, but no, I hate to break the news to you. That is correct. Now, obviously, I make mistakes too. There's, 1,000 hours of content up there, so there probably could be a mistake. Not in this case, but it was an option question, but I felt like I was going to be nice and say, well, you're not quite wrong. And I thought, no, this guy needs a brush back. You're wrong. All right. Anything else for today? Great session.
Thank you.
We have our live stream tonight. So tonight live stream is also free. The problem with the live stream is we just don't, well, Brian has his whiteboard and he joins us most nights, but I don't think it lends itself as well to as Zoom does to bringing up the Kaplan Q Bank. And, there's too many numbers. So we get, 50, 60 people. And so it's just different, but you're welcome to join us. I think that's good just for fellowship and knowing that we have victorious test takers coming by and checking in, but a little different. This is a little more intimate than is the live stream we do every Tuesday, but that is available as well. I used to do a Tuesday overtime session like this, and I just thought it was too much, because it's, we start at 5 and then it goes to like 8 or 9. And, We got games to watch and things to do. I'm joking, but
What
all
time
righty.
tonight?
At 5 p.m. Arizona time, Catherine.
Okay, 8 New York.
Yeah, Arizona doesn't change its time, so it
Yeah,
confuses people.
that screwed me up today too, by the way.
Yeah. So now I'm saying Arizona MT parentheses. Now what I'm going to do is put either PT because when we don't change. So right now, Arizona Mountain Time is Pacific time. But then when it switches back, I think I'm going to start putting Arizona, MT. It'll be the same. So I have people all the time. Oh, it said Mountain Time. I said, well, if you look closely, it says Arizona Mountain Time, which is Arizona because Arizona doesn't move the clock up or back. All right. I'll see some of you tonight. Catherine, I'll see some of you are all welcome to join us for the office hours. That'll go up either today or tomorrow. And we'll also put up another Q&A jam session today or tomorrow, and I'll do that next week. Those will be for next week. And then John, Dean at Google Exam Prep, just send me an email. I'll call you and we'll find a shared screen day for you, date, time that works for the both of us.
Good luck to all of you.
Okay.
Let me know if you get an email.
Hey,
Thank you.
John, I love it too. Thanks for joining us as a vet. Sometimes
Good
vets
luck.
that don't feel like they need to participate or want to participate. So I always appreciate it when people choose to participate. So thank you so much.
No worries.
Love your little office there too. Now I got to ask, what's the baseball bat? It looks like it's important.
Well, there's that one there, and then there's that little one back behind me there. That
Yeah.
behind me is a 1903.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you think about these new bats that the Yankees are using? Or do they have a different barrel on them or something?
I can't stand new baseball, man.
Yeah, you don't like it.
I am so old school. I'm from Boston, so everyone
Yeah.
asked me if I'm a Red Sox fan, and I said I stopped being a Red Sox fan the second they gave LeBron a piece of the pie.
Yeah, there you go.
That's how old school I am with it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
no,
well, I feel sorry for your basketball, Jason Tatum. That just hurt my heart for that young man.
we have so we have an office down here, and we have an office up in Massachusetts, office up in Rybrook, New York. So we have multiple offices,
Well,
and
perfect.
Jason's a good guy, and when that happened, both me and the partners were sitting there like we thought it was a repeat this year for sure. But
Yeah, what's that saying? You're a life insurance guy, and I'm sure maybe you do that medical as well. But as I always tell people, wealth without health is meaningless.
it's interesting because there's like two components to it, and I've ridden on the wave of the one side of things that has all that other side, and now that I'm trying to transition to just be more well-rounded, it's no, you're right, knowing the concept
Yeah.
but not being able to. So
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll get you through it for sure. We'll get you through as a vet, but I like vets a little bit too, John, because in general, John, the veterans like yourself, the OGs are a little more resilient, right? They don't collapse when they get they miss the mark. Damn it, I'll get it next time, right?
so what now what? So what now
Yeah.
what?
All right. All right, guys. I'll see you later.
Appreciate you. Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
Thanks, Dean.